Outgoing Premier Job Mokgoro has resigned as a member of the Northwest Legislature. His office released a letter this morning. His resignation comes just a day after he announced that he was stepping down as Premier. Mokgoro says he tried to root out corruption that plagued the province. To talk more about the latest political developments in the Northwest, I'm joined by the former Northwest Premier, Popo Molefe. Good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time, Molefe. When one looks at what is going on in the province and has been for quite some time now, and the developments around, the outgoing Premier, what do you make of all of these developments that are seemingly, causing a lot of confusion, even for members of the governing party, but also residents themselves?
Good evening, Bongiwe. Well, the developments in the Northwest are worrisome indeed. What is worrying even more is that, since 1994, the Northwest Province has had 7 premiers. I did 10 years as the premier there, and thereafter, there were 6 premiers appointed, as said. I can't explain why the situation is confusing to the members, but it is certainly confusing in the sense that the instability in a province, right, which at the beginning of the democratic governance was one of the best performing provinces. If they were to be ranked, it was always in the top 3. And suddenly things degenerated to a point where there's absolute instability in the province. There's jockeying for positions. There's a broad range of factions. I mean, the other day I was talking to someone in the Northwest, and when we were trying to count, he seemed to suggest that there are about 4 factions in the province, each one of them really fighting for the opportunity to get power in the ANC, which would enable them to access resources, which resources would not be used for the ordinary people of the province, but they want them for themselves and their cronies. It's a worrisome situation. And I think also the question of the removal of the withdrawal of the premier and the nomination of the new one could have been done differently. I mean, that it was necessary for engagement with the premier, get him to agree that for reasons that he himself would acknowledge, he needed to step aside. And only thereafter would it have become necessary then to nominate a new premier, because that second premier would have followed a process. The nomination of second premier would have followed a process where the serving premier would have had to resign as premier and then resign as a member of the legislature, and the next one would then have to be confirmed as a member of the legislature, whereafter the legislature could then elect him. I think the situation was such that the waters politics had become very murky and, as you correctly point out, confusing to ordinary people who were observing the developments.
And when one looks at what you've just said now around the handling of this particular matter, others have suggested that it should have been the mother body at national level that would have communicated with the outgoing premier on the decisions, instead of leaving it to the provincial structure, which also appeared to have not had a cordial relationship with the outgoing premier. Would you agree with this assertion?
Well, I suppose, yes, in the light of the the divisions that were there, it probably would have been better to do it that way. But then you see the organization has got its own protocols that it applies, or the relationship between the higher and lower structures. I think critical in this matter is that I don't know what the case is now, but premiers, following a discussion in the party, are nominated by the president of the governing party, who's also the president of the country in this instance. Perhaps if it was dealt with at that level, there would not have been the sort of confusion and suspicions as to what the motives might be, which gave rise to the call for the serving premier to withdraw.
We saw Prof. Mokgoro leaving on Thursday, saying that he's resigning as the premier of the province, but stayed on as a member of the legislature. And then today we wake up to news that he's now resigned as the member of the provincial legislature. Could our reading be correct in this case when we say then that him not resigning as the member of the legislature yesterday, when he was resigning as premier, may have been to frustrate the process for his successor to then not be able to have a spot in the legislature to also then become premier? Could we be correct in that reading?
No, I would not impute any other motive to that. Safe to say that it seems to me the sequence is correct. You resign as the premier, and the logical consequence of that resignation would be that you then resign as a member of the legislature, especially to the extent that the legislature did not have a vacancy which could be filled by a candidate from the list of the party that is governing. So it was correct to do it that way. I would not impute any ulterior motive to it. I would not say that he intended to frustrate the incoming premier.
And when you know, as you alluded to this earlier on, that the Northwest is such a deeply divided province, anything that is done there should be done in such a careful manner to be able to bring about the unity. When you look ahead, how does Bushi Mape, as the premier designate, take this province forward and ensure that these factions that you have also confirmed as well that do exist, and you're now saying you're hearing there could be 4, how does he unite all of these people in order to ensure that there are services for the people on the ground?
Well, I think when one is a leader, it is required that at that level there's a need for one to demonstrate maturity of leadership. I think Comrade Bushi Mape has always been with us. He knows the challenges that we had to face when we set up a province that was deeply divided, far more divided than today. The difference, of course, at the time was that the divisions were by and large between the ANC and other parties like the Botswana Christian Democratic Party, some elements who had been in what was called the Triple P, the Conservative Party, the Nationalist Party, as well as the Freedom Front. Today, the difficulty is that this division has become endemic within the governing party itself. But Bushi knows the level of maturity required, the humility required of a premier of a province to pull together all strengths of the organization. And I think it's important also that those who are members of the governing party should assist in rallying the community within the province behind Premier-elect Bushi Mape and the African National Congress as it seeks to consolidate its unity and provide the leadership necessary to give effective service delivery to the ordinary people. Because we're about building the province, providing services to our people, stimulating growth in the economy, attracting investments into that province.
And when you then, look at the tough job that he has that lies ahead, and you say that he's somebody that, would have the required maturity, would have the kind of ways in which he needs to then improve service delivery in the province, do you think the governing party as well, in fact government, should move here to removing the province from Section 100, because others are saying this is what also led the outgoing Premier to find himself with, hands that were tied and thus not being able to carry out his duties because the province was under administration?
Yeah, well, the first point that we need to make is that the challenge of service delivery is pervasive throughout the country. And I don't think we should proceed on the basis that one person called the Premier in the Northwest Province will resolve what is a general problem of the ANC-led government across the country. So that it is critical that we look also at the quality of people who have been appointed into the strategic positions within the province and the leadership that has been given to them in the past and that needs to be given to them now and in the future. The reorientation of the entire civil service and the political leadership in the legislature and in the executive, including the local municipalities, towards that of serving the people. That has to be done. Yes, indeed, you can't have a Premier who's going to lead a province, but he's going to lead a province already hamstrung by the fact that the province has been put under administration. You might as well run the province under that administration and not appoint the Premier of the province. He needs to be able to make critical decisions necessary to move the province forward. But if he operates under the administrative proclamation, it means somebody else has got the authority to make the decision. The Premier is just an observer who must just watch and really like a part of the audience in a drama that is playing out in a theater that is directed by a person called the administrator.
And what becomes, as a final question, what becomes the role of the president or even the top six in ensuring that peace and stability really returns to that province, especially when you look at the fact that it is so deeply divided and may need some assistance going forward?
Well, I am satisfied that at the National Working Committee and National Executive level, right up to the presidency, the intention cannot be doubted. I think they are committed to stabilizing the province, and I think the actions that they have taken are an attempt at trying to create an environment that can lead to that stability. Whether they were appropriate at that given time, I mean, they and they alone are the best judges of that situation. But I see them really paying a lot of attention and monitoring what is developing in the Northwest Province, providing the guidance necessary for the new Premier and the team that the new Premier is going to be leading, to make sure that they can do their job without any fetters created by anybody.
Dr. Molefe, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it here on News at Prime. That's former Northwest Premier Popo Molefe, who was just sharing with us his insights as he looks on at the situation that is currently unfolding in the Northwest. We know that there is an acting Premier, Mutlalepula Khosho, who is holding the reins for now, because we know that the Premier designate is Bushi Mape, who is going to be taking over from the outgoing Job Mokgoro.